Hello, please switch your language modules. I'm going to speak in English. I assume you all know English because it's pretty important for the mobile web. I'm Peter Koch from Amsterdam. I run a site called quirksmo.org. I've been studying browsers for the last 12 years. And 2 years ago or something, I got very, very bored with the browsers. Why? Because they supported everything. They support most of the CSS, most of the JavaScript, most of the new HTML5 stuff. And my job is to say what they do not support. I create huge compatibility tables with all kinds of stuff that browsers don't support. But if they support everything, my job becomes pretty boring. So I was very happy when 2 years ago Vodafone invited me to come to Düsseldorf to study the mobile web and the mobile browsers, and that's something else. So since then I've been studying the mobile web, thinking about the future of the mobile web, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. For the moment, if you say mobile web, everybody thinks, okay, our website should also work on an iPhone, on an Android, on a Symbian device, on a tablet. And that's important. Don't make a mistake, that's very important. But there's much, much more to the mobile web. And what that much more is exactly what we're going to discuss today. Suppose you have a company that wants to create an app for the mobile. They want to be in the pockets of as many consumers as they can. What we're having right now is this set of operating systems that you should cater to. These are the sales numbers of 2010. So pure sales, not actual use. And as you see, Symbian is still the largest. That is going to change this year probably. Android has grown hugely, and there's iOS and BlackBerry and a few minor ones. In theory, if you create an application that you want to be in the pocket of every consumer out there, you should make sure that it works on all these platforms. And in theory, you say, okay, we'll spend 38% of our budget on Symbian, 22% on Android, 16% each on iOS and BlackBerry, etc., etc. In practice, that does not happen. If you create an app, you create one for iPhone and one for Android, and you say, what rest? What do we need the rest for? As far as I'm concerned, this is going to change in the next 2 years or something, because it just doesn't make sense. The figures we saw just now, the sales figures from 2010, they were only about smartphones, which consisted about 20% of the total phone market. But feature phones, cheaper phones, are also going to support the web. I tested quite a few feature phone browsers in the past few months, and they were actually pretty decent. They can handle a website. They might even be able to handle a web app. But writing native apps for them is much more difficult. So what we're going to see here is a change. Many, many apps, not all of them, but many of them will switch to the mobile web. This is the future of most applications on mobile, just HTML5. Why? Because it works everywhere. Some applications will, of course, stay native. I'm especially thinking of games here. If you create a top-level game that has an excellent user experience and depends on smooth scrolling and panning, yes, of course, then it makes sense to stay on the native side of things and create one for iPhone and maybe one for Android, and that's about it. But for the average application, basically what I call a marketing application, a way of getting your brand in the user's pocket, we are going to switch to HTML5. Now, this in itself is not a really new story. I mean, we've been discussing native versus web for the past year now, at least. I would like to take the story a bit further in this session. Of course, we have to think clearly about what the big advantage of HTML5 apps is, and that is, of course, spreading it out to all the various devices. Why does it work on any device? Because any device has a decent browser now, except for one, of course, which is in the lower right corner, but that's going to change. That's going to change. I mean, how many of you are web developers who just work on desktop websites? Oh, of course, some. Did you ever wonder why it was that Internet Explorer, which of course started as 6 and was horrible, then came 7, which was okay-ish, 8 was slightly more okay-ish, and then of course all of a sudden they made a huge jump from IE8 to IE9. In case you don't know, IE9 supports many more of the web standards than IE8. And why did they make that jump now? It's not because of the desktop, it's because of mobile. Because Microsoft badly needs a good mobile browser for its Windows Phone platform. So basically we see everybody gearing up towards mobile. And the beauty of the whole HTML5 application idea is that it also works on normal browsers. So what I call HTML5 apps, you basically create one core application in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, simple normal web standards, which you subsequently deploy to as many mobile platforms as possible. And now in the ideal case, your CSS and your JavaScript especially are stored on the device itself. There are several techniques for that. They are slightly incompatible, but they basically work towards the same goal, which is making sure that some of the data you need to run the web application resides on the phone itself. But suppose that doesn't work. Suppose you have an older phone and it doesn't support W3C widgets, it doesn't support app cache, it doesn't support local storage, then you still have a website. And that's the beauty of the HTML5 app idea. You just create HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You try, of course, as hard as you can to put it on the phone of the user. But if that doesn't work, the user can still start up his browser and surf to your site in the normal old-fashioned way. So that's a very important point in HTML5 apps. You don't just create an application that either works or doesn't, you also create a website. The trick here, of course, is deployment. In theory, you should just be able to download and install an HTML5 app on any phone. In practice, that doesn't work yet. So there were 2 companies especially that have worked hard on HTML5 app deployment, which are Uxebu, which is here in Munich. They created Apparatio, which basically you give it an HTML, CSS, JavaScript site, and it wraps it up nicely so that it's more or less native to iOS, Android, WebOS, and several other operating systems. PhoneGap from Nitobe in Vancouver is doing exactly the same with their build.phonegap.com. So if you're interested in HTML5 apps right now, take a look at these 2 deployment systems. Okay, so what I've told so far is nothing really new. If you've been following the native versus web discussion, you already knew most of this. I would like to take it one step further. How many of you know the fisherman's story and the way mobile changed his life? Oh, only very few. Okay, then I'm going to tell it. By the way, I'm conducting a poll. The story I'm about to tell is very common in the mobile world, but I've noticed that especially in the web world, people don't know it, and they should. Anyway, there's this fisherman, and his father was a fisherman, his grandfather was a fisherman, etc., etc. Every day he goes out to the sea, catches fish, returns to his town, and tries to sell it. Sometimes there's a lot of fish on the market, in which case he gets little money. At other times there's little fish on the market, in which case he earns a lot of money. But he doesn't really have influence on the process. Until, that is, he gets a mobile phone. Because what he can do now, when he's done his daily catch and goes back to the shore, as soon as he's in reach of the mobile network, he starts to call friends in several towns along the coast and asks them, okay, what's the price of the fish in your town and in yours and in yours? And then he can make a good economic decision about where to go with his boat and to sell his catch. That is the power of mobile. That is the way mobile is changing people's life all over the world. Now, this story is well known. It's been told for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years already. What I'd really like to do today is to take a quick peek into this fisherman's future. In order to do that, we first have to determine what kind of phone exactly is he using. Of course, I'm making a guess here, but I'm supposing it will be a cheap Nokia. Nokia has a huge market share in the developing world. The fisherman does not have a lot of money, so it will likely be a cheap Nokia, something like what you're seeing right here. The Nokias that were sold, I don't know, until last year or something, did not really support anything having to do with the mobile web. They had a browser, but I mean, several of my friends have old Nokias, and every time I look at them and say, oh yes, you can go onto the internet. And they say, huh, does my phone have a browser? Yes, it does. You click here, and then here, and then here, and then you have a browser. And it's a total surprise to them. Besides, of course, there's a matter of cost. Going online with a data plan costs money, probably too much for the fisherman. Anyway, the point here is that the phone landscape is changing rapidly. What we will probably see happening this year, in 2011, is that there will come cheap Android devices on the market. Some sources say they will cost about $100, others say about $50. So I took the average and say, okay, they will cost about $75, which is, for an Android device, is pretty cheap. Still, and that's important to notice, this is way over the budget of our fisherman. He just cannot afford $75 on a phone. Maybe 25, but he can't afford the triple of that. But of course that's going to change, because in a few years' time, the phone will have dropped in price and will be roughly $25. I mean, it could be in 2013 or 2015, but this point in time is coming, and at a certain point, he will be able to afford a modern mobile phone with a modern browser and a modern app system. What will happen to his life then? He will be able to install apps on his phone. Let's for a moment say that he likes the idea. He installs a few games. He may install, I don't know, something to do with photos or whatever. I mean, people all over the world are exactly the same. They want the same from their mobile phone. But let's continue with the story about his catch and selling his catch in the town that gives the most money for it. And then we will see that he'll probably have apps that have something to do with keeping track of prices, not just the daily prices of today, but maybe historical. Maybe he can recognize a few patterns. Maybe he can say, hey, on Thursdays, this town never has any fish coming in. I don't know why, but on Thursdays, I should always go there. And maybe even more complicated patterns. Maybe because of his good use of his mobile phone, he can afford to buy more ships, 3 or 4 of them, put a captain on each of them, and have them all sail for him. And he has to keep track of those ships. Maybe what he needs is a warning system against corrupt police officers. Don't go through that town, because the police officer over there, who always takes half of your earnings, is there. So go to another town. Whatever. In any case, I think this fisherman has a need for certain information, and I think he will use an app in order to get that information. So, the fisherman has a Nokia, or an Android, doesn't really matter. And he installs an app, and he works with it, and it all works absolutely fine. Now, at a certain point in time, his cousin from another town, who's also a fisherman, comes to visit him. And of course, our fisherman eagerly shows off his application on his phone. And says, oh, you can do this and that and that. And his cousin, also being a fisherman, thinks it's absolutely wonderful. He wants that app too. There's only one problem. He's got a Samsung and not a Nokia. So what are we going to do now? Somehow, this application will have to be transferred from a Nokia to a Samsung phone. Let's first assume that this application is in fact a web application, so it will run fine on the Samsung once it arrives there. But how exactly are we going to make the switch from Nokia to Samsung? A first opportunity, of course, would be an app store. But I think there's a problem here. Let's say that our fisherman has gotten his application from the Nokia App Store. He can, of course, show that to his cousin, but his cousin can't use that information because he's on a Samsung, and he has to know how the Samsung App Store works. Besides, he has to subscribe to the App Store. He may even need a credit card for an App Store, which, of course, he can never get because he's too poor. So I do not think that the App Store route is going to work for our fishermen. A second option would, of course, be just downloading it from the web. Because web applications can be downloaded from the web. Maybe our fisherman did it like that. But Again, I think that's not very likely, because in order to download something from the web, you need to have a data plan, a way of just connecting to the internet, and I think it's just too expensive for our fisherman. Besides, he will have to learn how to use his browser, he will have to get the URL from his cousin, etc., etc., and there's all kinds of steps involved. It's not impossible, but I don't think the fisherman will find this particularly useful or handy to do. Instead, what I think they will do, and what I think the future of the mobile web is to transfer the application via Bluetooth. The fisherman just connects to his cousin's phone, sends out the application, the cousin receives it, installs it, and it runs immediately. Now, the important thing to notice is that this is not some futuristic idea I'm having. I have actually done this back 2 years ago. Back 2 years ago, when I still worked at Vodafone in Düsseldorf, I took a Symbian phone that ran the Vodafone Widget Manager. And the Vodafone Widget Manager was installed in order to run W3C widgets, which is a kind of HTML5 app. I won't go into the technical details. And I created a lot of widgets for Vodafone because they wanted me to test the browser inside the Widget Manager, which was Opera. So I tested, and I started to understand how W3C widget worked. And then a couple of months later, I got my first Windows Mobile 6.5 device. Not 6.1. 6.1 is horrible. 6.5 is okay-ish. I mean, you could actually do something on a Windows 6.5 mobile. I studied the technical documentation, and all of a sudden I saw W3C widgets supported. I thought, wow, I have to try that. So I had to transfer one of my test widgets to the Windows mobile phone. And I thought, shall I connect my phone to my computer and send over the test widgets? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send it via Bluetooth. So basically what I did, I took my Symbian phone, I made a connection to one Windows mobile phone, I sent over the widget, and it worked. Almost. Turned out that there was a tiny compatibility issue. There was one single attribute in an XML file associated with the widget, and Microsoft needed that attribute, and Opera choked on it. So I had to remove the attribute, and then it worked on Windows Mobile. And if I included, if I removed the attribute, it would not work on Opera, and if I included it, it would not work on Microsoft. And well, but this was purely a compatibility issue, and it's meanwhile been solved. But I still think that I've proven here that the concept works. After that, I was very enthusiastic, and I took an ancient Sony Ericsson CyberShot, which also runs the Opera browser. I transferred the widget to that, and the Sony Ericsson recognized it as a widget and knew it should start up the Opera Widget Manager. Unfortunately, the Widget Manager crashed. But still, I mean, what we're talking about here is a principle. It is, in principle, possible to send HTML5 apps from one phone to another via Bluetooth. So, that is the first real change I think we're going to see in the mobile web. It will take a while before this is commonplace. Right now, the process is not very user-friendly. You have to know exactly which buttons to press on both phones. But I think this will come a lot further because it makes so much sense. You're at a party and you're showing off your new mobile phone, and you show a cool app, and somebody else says, hey, I want it. Sure, I'll send it over. Bluetooth, bang, it's on the other person's phone. It makes total sense from a consumer perspective. So, let's say this works. Let's say HTML5 apps will be distributed via Bluetooth, from Nokia to Samsung, from Android to BlackBerry, whatever. However, we're not there yet. Let's return to our fisherman for a moment. Because what our fisherman needs, oh, you can't see the nice cloud over there. There's a cloud there, and it's symbolic for the data cloud from which he actually has to get his data. Because an application is all wonderful, but if you don't actually get up-to-date data, the application is worthless. So our fisherman will have to receive data from the cloud. And I'd like to talk a bit about that data for a moment. First of all, something obvious, that data that is supposed to be interpreted by a web app will likely be JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Why? Because JSON is lightweight, it's one of the lightest data formats in existence, and B, it's already supported. Every single browser already supports JSON. That's exactly why they started working on it. So, okay, you create a web app, an HTML5 app, and you want it to receive JSON. And once you receive the JSON, you show it in a nice graph or a map or whatever. The point is, how are we going to get that JSON onto the phone? Wi-Fi? For a fisherman, I think that Wi-Fi is simply not available because he'd have to have a Wi-Fi station on his boat. And that Wi-Fi station would have to be connected to, well, something else on shore. That's just not going to work for a fisherman. A data plan. That's possible, I suppose, but I think it's too expensive. Data plans are expensive even here in the West, especially because of the extortionate roaming charges they give you. I mean, I'm from Holland, I'm here in Germany now, and a megabyte costs me, well, too much money. I don't want to talk about it. But anyway, I think this will be too expensive for our fishermen. So what's left? SMS. And SMS sounds about right. So this is the second trend I'd like to present to you, JSON over SMS. What are the advantages of SMS? First of all, it's the only way of pushing data. On mobile, there's no other way to actually push data. Well, yeah, a voice call, but we're not talking about voice here, we're talking about data. And that's important to our fisherman, because what he does not want is to get his battery empty while he's still at sea, because he needs his phone when he comes back on shore. And if that phone is constantly going to poll a server somewhere, the battery is going to drain fast. So basically what he needs is some kind of system that only wakes up the phone when there's actual new data to share. SMS, in other words. Secondly, premium SMS already exists everywhere. And that's a very easy way for the provider of the service and of the application to make money. Because it's all fun to have an application, to have all kinds of data, but somewhere somebody is doing a lot of work to gather that data and send it out to the mobile phones, and that someone wants to earn some money. And the easiest way for him to earn money is using premium SMS. And further, absolutely every phone in existence supports SMS, so there are no support issues at all. And finally, an SMS is human readable. The SMS itself is human readable, fine, of course. And JSON, the data format, is also kind of human readable. So what I think we'll get is this. I think this kind of data will be sent via SMS to a fisherman that needs the data. Well, he needs to know the prices and he needs to figure out where to go in order to sell his catch. So this is the second thing I think is going to change. We need to get rid of the idea that in order to receive the web data, we must be connected to the internet. Of course, we'll always work being connected to the internet and receiving data, but there are other options, and we should start to think about that. However, I'm not totally sure if you've noticed what we've done so far. Basically, we have changed the equation on money, or monetization, as they call it nowadays. Because users share apps for free. The fisherman shares the app with his cousin, and that's absolutely free. However, they pay for the data via premium SMS, most likely. So basically, what we have here is that monetization of apps is going to change considerably over the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years or so. And we basically don't need the app stores anymore. Where is the app store in the whole story I told you just now? It's not there. We don't need it. So I think that in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, we're going to see the end of the app store. Not that it will disappear completely, but they will become vastly less important than they are today. So let's take a step back and think, what do we need app stores for? And in general, these are the three arguments that are given in favor of App Store. It makes it easy to discover your application. It arranges all the payments for you. And it distributes your app to whoever asks for it. And that is all true, of course, but it's not the entire story. Because there are two other points involved with the App Store that I think have gotten too little attention. The first one is the App Store works for Apple. We can all agree on that. Apple makes shitloads of money with the App Store. But will it work for anyone else? That's a question nobody's ever asked. Secondly, there's a cost of ownership involved in the App Store, and you never hear anybody talk about that either. So let's go through these points and let's discuss App Stores for a moment. First of all, discoverability. Basically, the question is, I have a nice, neat app, and I want people to download it and pay for it. How do I get these people to discover the app? The ancient answer is through the App Store, because users will browse through the App Store, will find applications they like, and will download and install them and pay them for you. Which is fine if you have a couple of thousand apps, but not if you have a couple of hundreds of thousands of apps. I mean, how are people going to discover your application when there's 300,000 other applications vying for their attention? It's not going to happen automatically or anything. There are, of course, a few ways to get people to download your application. First one is a traditional marketing campaign. Download our apps on all the buses and in the stations and on TV and whatever. That will work, especially if you're a well-known brand. Then people will say, oh yeah, I like that app. I'm going to search for it in the App Store. Fine, works, no problem. But the App Store itself doesn't participate in that at all. It has zero discoverability features. And the second way of promoting your app is, of course, putting it in the top 10 page or the most downloaded page or whatever. And basically that means paying a lot of money. So if the App Store is very successful, the only way of getting people to discover your app is paying a lot of money. And that's not the original idea of the App Store. The original idea of the App Store was that any developer could upload an app and become successful with it. And that happened in the early days. Why? Because there were only few apps. So if your app was really good, it immediately stood out from the market and you could immediately make money with it. So the discoverability feature, I do not really believe in it. I mean, it will only work if the App Store is small. In theory, that would mean that the Windows Phone App Store has an absolutely fine discoverability because there's only 5,000 to 7,000 apps in it, while the Apple App Store has zero discoverability because there are 300,000 apps in it. Anyway, I do not really believe in the discoverability argument. Secondly, distribution of apps. I don't believe in that argument either. I mean, of course, you can distribute your app via an app store, but you can just as well distribute it via the web. It's already possible on Android. If you uncheck one checkbox in the settings, then you can download apps from wherever you like. And wherever you like basically means the web. So why not use that for distribution? I don't see that the app stores have a fundamental solution to deliver for distribution of apps. There's one exception though, and I'll come back to that later, and that's security. Okay, so the App Store works for Apple. We can all agree on that. Apple makes immense amounts of money with it. The point is not made often enough, that Apple can only do this because it has the enthusiastic support of developers and consumers. From the very start, developers were enthusiastic about the iPhone platform and wanted to create apps. Consumers were also excited by the App Store and wanted to download and pay for apps. Especially because the average Apple consumer is A, somewhat more wealthy than the average person, and B, is willing to spend money on applications. We've seen that proven over and over again in the past few years. So this works for Apple because it can reach developers and consumers. And who else can? I don't know. Google absolutely has a great outreach to developers. All developers are enthusiastic about Google products, use them a lot, etc., etc. But they are not so very great in reaching consumers. And I mean, I'm not talking about consumers of search, of web search here, but consumers who actually need to go into a store and buy a phone. Because in order to get Android on the rails, Google had to partner up with Samsung, with HTC and with others who are going to create Android phones for the market. On its own, Google could not reach the market. You remember probably the Nexus 1. It's a good phone, no doubt about it, but Google's attempts at selling it directly to consumers failed miserably. Why? Because Google doesn't have pull with consumers yet. Now they've got the Nexus S, and they're going to repeat it. And I've already seen huge marketing campaigns around the Nexus S, so maybe they're going to succeed this time. But at this point in time, Google does not have the relationship to consumers that Apple has. Now let's take a look at the traditional mobile companies like Nokia, Samsung, and RIM. They have exactly the opposite. They have excellent connections to consumers because consumers are used to buying Symbian phones, Samsung phones, and BlackBerry phones. And if they're happy with their phone, they want another. But they don't have so much pull with developers. I mean, there are, of course, Symbian developers, there's BlackBerry developers, and there is developers for the various operating systems that Samsung uses. But it's not quite the same as the immense enthusiasm that iOS and Android gave to developers. Besides, development for Symbian is pretty hard. About a year ago, I read a report that said, okay, if you want to get into Android, it will take you about 4 months to get sufficiently into the system that you can easily write apps. For Symbian, that time was 15 months. So that's Symbian's problem. BlackBerry has more or less the same problem. In any case, they have a hard core of developers, of course, but they cannot reach out beyond that hardcore because the rest of the developing world is taken over by Apple and Google. So basically what we're seeing here is that no other mobile company has pull with both developers and consumers, which causes me to think that the App Store may be something unique for Apple and not a generic thing that will work for anyone who tries in the mobile world. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. So I don't think Apple's success can be easily copied. Then we've got cost of ownership. Basically, what do you need in order to maintain an app store? Few people think about that. And this is only a very partial list of things you need. You need a payment system. That's of course fine. But you need someone who's in charge of the payment system and someone who goes to talk to the banks and to the credit card companies and to the operators and other people who check that everything goes right and some very specialized programmers who can write secure transaction protocols and stuff like that. Then you need system administrators to just make sure that the App Store stays up, and if you press download, that then the app is actually downloaded to the phone. You've got content checkers, basically people who review all the apps that come in and make sure that they don't contain anything pornographic or racist or whatever. And you have people who write documentation for the languages that you write apps in, and best practices, articles, go to conferences, talk about the App Store, etc., etc., etc. And all this costs a lot of money. Now, Apple can pay for it. I have no doubt. Apple makes immense amount of money with its App Store and can easily pay for all these people. But the rest, I don't know. Is Google making money or losing money on the Android market? I just plain don't know, but I would not be entirely surprised if they're still losing money. As to the smaller app stores, GetJar is profitable, they say so themselves, but from all the rest, from Nokia and Samsung and LG and Vodafone and T-Mobile and AT&T and all of the rest, you never hear anything about the cost of ownership, which makes me think that they lose a lot of money in app stores. Which in turn means that the app stores will eventually end. I mean, starting up an app store and paying all these people for 1 year is of course a solid investment. But if you still don't make a profit after 3 years, a senior executive will start to scratch their head and wonder if it's such a good idea to continue with the App Store. One App Store has already fallen, it's a Java one. I did not know that, but it was a Java App Store for Sun, later from Oracle, and they've closed it down probably because the cost of ownership was too high. Okay, let's keep on the topic of money, payments. Now, of course, in all app stores, there is a way of paying for apps, and there is a way of letting most of that money flow to the developer. This has always been important for the app stores, and of course, Apple pioneered it, and everybody else copied Apple. Works. There's no problem here. The point is, there are better payment systems, and I'm especially thinking about operator billing. You go somewhere, you discover something, let's say you discover an article or a new level for a game you already have installed, or maybe a messaging service for the latest news out of Japan, I don't know, and you have to pay for that. Basically, what you can do with true operator billing is just saying, okay, this will cost you 12 cents. And the user says, okay, I do it. One round of confirmation, do you really want to pay 12 cents? Yes, I do. And then the 12 cents is automatically added to your operator bill, which you receive anyway each month. The most important part here is that credit cards are not involved. Every single app store so far works with credit cards. But think back to our fisherman. Can our fisherman get a credit card? No way. He can't even get a bank account because he has too little money. The most advanced country in the world when it comes to mobile payments is Kenya, where about 50% of the population now transfers about 25% of the gross domestic product by mobile phones. Now, most of those people would never be able to get a bank account, let alone a credit card. So what mobile has done there is allowed them to participate in the money economy. I mean, apart from just carrying around wads of cash and paying for them. So basically, what, as far as I'm concerned, the app stores are doing wrong is that they are being totally dependent on credit cards. Most other payment systems that people are talking about right now, such as NFC, near field communication, are also dependent on credit cards. I think that the payment system of the future will not be dependent on credit cards, but instead on operator billing. You just say, yes, I want to pay 12 cents, and it's automatically added to your operator bill, and you receive it at the end of the month. Alternatively, if you have a prepaid account, it's just deducted from your prepaid account, and, well, everything's set to. And you don't need a credit card anywhere, you don't even need a bank account anywhere. You can just go to the shop, buy a €5 a €5 prepaid account, and then basically buy anything online until you've reached the end of your money. So I think payments are going to change considerably over the past, well, this will take longer, next 5 to 10 years or something. This is going to take a lot of time. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, the app stores are on the wrong track here. There's one more item I'd like to discuss today. It's basically the capstone of the mobile web, except that it's not there yet, and that's device APIs. I'm not sure if you know what device APIs are, but they are totally important to anything that has even vaguely something to do with mobile. Native apps offer them automatically, and basically the device API is meant in order to access interesting functionality on your mobile phone, or on your tablet, or on whatever. For instance, you can go to the camera and tell the camera, okay, now make a picture, then automatically resize that picture to, I don't know, 200 by 200 pixels, and send it off to that service. This is totally normal in native apps. There's a lot of native apps that do that, especially in combination with Twitter accounts. But it's not yet being done with a web app. Why not? Because a web app cannot automatically access the camera. Something similar goes for games. The average game needs access to the accelerometer because you want to steer your racing car like this with your phone, or you have a gravity game that you have to roll a ball into a hole or whatever. All that requires access to the accelerometer of the device. And for now, web applications don't have that access. Native applications do, of course. So basically what must happen is that web apps will have to start offering device APIs too. And they're working on it. A lot of work is being done. Unfortunately, it's rather spread out. So once web applications have gotten access to device APIs, we can do stuff like this. Go to the phone, tell it to make a call, to which number, to the number in the address book that's called mom. And this is great. I mean, this is just one example. I made up the code. It's not actually going to look like this. I try to keep the code simple. In a similar way, we are going to access the accelerometer, the camera, maybe even SMS messaging, especially in combination with payments. If you think back to the payment story for a moment, you say, I want to buy this, and then you have to confirm it later on. How does that confirmation work? Most likely by SMS, because the operators must establish your identity. Anyone can go to a website and say, I want to pay for this. Okay, but who are you, and do you have the credit to pay for it? That's what the operators want to know. And the easiest way of doing that is by SMS. You just, the website basically sends out an SMS through your SIM card to the operator that says, okay, I want to pay 12 cents. The operator sends back an SMS to you that say, hey, do you really want to pay 12 cents? And then you have to say, yes, I really want to pay 12 cents. Another SMS goes out. This whole system is fairly secure. But it may become a hassle for consumers after a while, you know. Pay, yes, I want to pay. Yes, I really want to pay. I mean, it's safe, but it's also a hassle. So you could think about applications that do that for you, that send and receive SMSs for you. And again, you need device APIs for that. However, you may have noticed already that there is a huge problem here, and that's security. What about this? Go to a random website, just a website, all around the world. It says, okay, give me your address book, I make a string of it, and I send it off entirely to this malicious website that collects people's address books. Now, we don't want that to happen, obviously. Similarly, in the SMS example I gave just now, you cannot just have a random website or web app that says, okay, I'm going to send SMSs in your name now and transfer $200 to my account. We can't have that. So there is a huge security problem in device APIs, and that's the main reasons they haven't been implemented yet in the mobile browsers and in the web apps. And actually, this is a security problem I talked about a little earlier when I talked about app stores and distribution. This might be the single way in which app stores can remain relevant. They can just say, okay, we take care of that security for you. If you download an app from our app store, then you will be certain that it does no dangerous things. We've checked the code, and we've made sure that that code only does safe things that are described in the description of the app, and not stuff like this, or stuff like sending SMSs from your account. So that might be a way that app stores will remain relevant. Device APIs, of course, need a specification. And that is part of the problem right now, because do we have specifications for device APIs? Yes, in fact, we have 4 of them. And this is, of course, a problem. Bondi and Jill were the older ones, and both have become obsolete, by the way. But I think they've been implemented in a very few phones around the world, mostly for testing purposes. Excuse me. W3C is working on DAP, Device API. They are working on the specification there and are considering everything. And as usual, it takes a little while with W3C. They are very thorough and very good, but also very slow. So the specification is not ready yet. What we have instead, the only specification that currently works is WAC, Wholesale Application Community. It's a consortium of by now 68 operators that are working actively towards device APIs and also towards operator billing. Because, of course, the mobile operators have also always worried a lot that they would become dumb data pipes, as they call it. Mobile operators want to do something more than sending data packages from point A to point B. They want to offer some additional value, and operator billing is, of course, a total additional value that they should immediately start to offer. So that's why they're cooperating in WAC in order to create a worldwide system that allows both device APIs and mobile payment systems. Full disclosure here, I'm a paid consultant with WAC, so I know a little bit about specification. I've reviewed it. It's not bad. I mean, how many of you are JavaScript developers? Okay, a few. If you look at the WAC specification, you will say, this is weird JavaScript. It's not ugly, it makes sense, but it's a bit weird. And at least that was the feeling that I got. I communicated that concern to WAC, and I told them, okay, this may look a bit weird to normal JavaScript developers. And they said, yes, we did that deliberately because W3C DAP is using roughly the same syntactic constructs. And what we want, eventually, is WAC to merge with W3C specification. So, I mean, they've reiterated that time and again. WAC eventually is going to move towards W3C specification, and then we'll have only one specification for device APIs, which would be great, of course. But that's still in the future. Right now, device APIs aren't quite there yet, but web applications absolutely need them. So, that kind of wraps up my presentation. My idea of the mobile web is, of course, that native applications will be replaced by web applications. Not all native applications, especially the games will remain native, but a lot of branding stuff will become mobile web. Web data will be offered by SMS in addition to normal internet connection. There will be huge changes in monetization, both in what people exactly pay for, as in how the payments are going to be transferred. App stores will start to be on the defensive. They will not be no longer be the wave of the future, but a system that has passed its prime and now has to defend its existence. And finally, web applications need device APIs, but there's a huge security problem there. That was my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I will post these slides online. I always get that question, but I will only do it in mid-May because I'm going to repeat this presentation at, I don't know, 4 or 5 other conferences, and I don't want the attendees of that conference to read my presentation beforehand. So it will come online on my site, quirksmode.org, in mid-May. Anyway, I don't think we really have time for questions. Yeah? Okay. That was it. Thank you for your attention. I hope you learned something.